I'm Elaine Carter, 62 years old, a retired nurse who spent most of her life working night shifts and living on black coffee. I thought I'd seen every kind of human behavior during 4 decades in hospital corridors, but nothing prepared me for what happened that Sunday afternoon in my daughter's backyard. The grill was smoking, the lemonade sweating in a glass pitcher between my hands, and for a moment I let myself breathe. It was Jenna's first housewarming, the house I'd saved for, dreamed for, almost bled for. Friends and neighbors filled the yard with that lazy kind of summer laughter that makes you think life is finally settling into place. I was laying out forks beside the salad bowl when my son-in-law, Ryan, tapped his glass. He had that bright smile he uses when he's about to say something he thinks is charming. The chatter faded as people turned toward him. Jenna stood beside him, smoothing the hem of her sundress, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Ryan raised his beer and said he wanted to thank me for helping them start their life together. I nodded, waiting for the usual polite gratitude. Instead, he looked straight at me, his voice carrying across the tables. "So, Mom, when are you bringing your stuff over?" My fingers tightened around the lemonade pitcher. A few guests chuckled, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He gestured toward his mother, Lorraine, who was already smiling as if a plan had been arranged long ago. "She'll be moving in soon," he added. "No point in her wasting money on rent when we've got the space." The laughter died instantly. Jenna's face drained of color. Lorraine lifted her glass, pleased with herself, as if the house I'd given my daughter had quietly transformed into her retirement plan. Standing there in the heat of that afternoon, I felt something crack. Not the joy of the moment, but the trust I'd spent years trying to build. And that was the second I realized the biggest mistake I'd made wasn't buying the house. It was trusting the people I'd handed the keys to. 3 months before that disastrous barbecue, the house was nothing more than a quiet promise sitting at the end of a maple-lined street. I remember the first time I stepped into it alone. The floors smelled faintly of fresh varnish, the kind of scent that carries both hope and exhaustion. Sunlight slid across the living room like it was blessing the space. I stood there, with the realtor's voice fading into the background, thinking of all the nights I'd worked double shifts so my daughter wouldn't have to grow up counting pennies the way I did. I wasn't planning to buy a house that day. I'd driven over just to take a look. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But the truth was that responsible plans crack easily when confronted by something that feels like it was waiting for you. I walked through the kitchen, small, warm, with room for the kind of conversations Jenna and I had shared over late-night cups of tea. Then I stepped into what would become her future bedroom, and for a moment I could picture her there, pulling on a cardigan in the morning light, humming to herself the way she used to when she was a child. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Frank, asking if I had eaten. I told him where I was, expecting a long sigh or a lecture on impulsive decisions. Instead, he said he was 10 minutes away. When he arrived, he stepped into the kitchen beside me, wiping sawdust from his jeans like he always did after tinkering in his garage. "Nice bones," he murmured, tapping the door frame. "Solid foundation. You wouldn't have to worry about it settling wrong." I tilted my head at him. "I only came to look." He smiled, the gentle kind that made the world feel a little less sharp. "You've been looking for 2 years. Elaine, maybe it's time you let yourself choose something." I didn't answer. I just wandered through the hallway again, touching the cool banister, thinking about the house where Jenna grew up, the cramped 2-bedroom apartment where neighbors fought through the walls and radiators clanged like anvils. Jenna never complained. She read her books in the narrow corner of the couch, did homework on a fold-out table we had to tuck away every night. She was always grateful, always gentle. maybe too gentle for a world that doesn't hesitate to take advantage of softness. Frank followed me into the second bedroom. "You're thinking yourself into circles," he said. "You want the place. Say it out loud." I breathed in, letting the scent of fresh paint fill my chest. "I want it." That was all it took. The realtor appeared again, ready with papers and numbers. I felt my stomach twist the way it did before big decisions, but I'd lived long enough to recognize when fear was trying to disguise itself as practicality. I signed the offer, my hand trembling just enough for Frank to place his over mine. Later that evening, I called Jenna. She was in her apartment grading math quizzes, her voice soft with surprise when I told her I'd put an offer on a house. Not for me, but for her. For her future. For everything she'd worked for and everything I wanted her to have. "Mom," she whispered, "you don't have to do that." "I know," I said, "but I want to." She cried quietly on the phone, the way she always did when overwhelmed. I kept my voice steady, even as tears blurred the stack of mortgage documents in front of me. I'd promised myself long ago that my daughter would have choices I never had. This house was part of that promise. A week later, after the inspection cleared, Frank and I sat in a small office across from a real estate attorney. The air smelled of toner and old carpet. The attorney explained how property laws worked, how a gift before marriage remained separate property, how adding names to a deed changed its protection. I listened carefully, tucking every word into the place in my mind where I kept vital information, like dosages, blood pressures, the signs of a failing heart. "So," the attorney said, pushing a thin folder toward me, "if you want your daughter to have true security, the house should be transferred to her name before the wedding. No shared title, no obligation to her spouse. It keeps things clean." I nodded, glancing toward Frank. He gave a small, approving tilt of his head, the kind that said he knew I already understood all of this long before stepping into the room, driving home, the dusk settling over the neighborhood. I felt a strange mix of peace and unease. Peace because I was doing the right thing. Unease because I knew, deep down, that giving someone security sometimes reveals who resents not having it. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, I heard my late husband's voice the way I sometimes still did in the quiet. He told me once, the year before he passed, that Jenna would grow up to be stronger than both of us combined. I hoped he was right. Because strength, I was learning, wasn't just about surviving hardship. It was about standing tall when people you love ask you to surrender what you've bled for. I didn't know then that the house I'd just bought would become the battleground for a war I never wanted to fight. I only knew one thing for certain. Jenna deserved a place where no one could push her out. But life has a way of testing every promise a mother makes, and my test was waiting just beyond the moment she said yes to the man who would later ask me, in front of a yard full of people, when I planned to move my belongings into her house. The day Jenna asked me to meet Ryan's family, I remember smoothing the wrinkles from my blouse twice before leaving the house. It wasn't nerves. Exactly. It was the quiet hope that the people who loved my daughter might become an extension of the little family she and I had built over the years. I didn't expect perfection, just kindness, or at least the willingness to try. Ryan suggested dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the river. It was one of those places with low lighting and strong coffee, where the waiters know half the customers by name. When I walked in, Jenna waved me over, her face bright in that sweet way it gets when she wants a moment to go well. Ryan stood to hug me, then stepped aside to introduce his mother. Lorraine Carter had the kind of presence that entered a room before her body did. Her perfume, floral, heavy, reached me before her smile did, and even that smile felt carefully constructed. She took my hand gently, her fingers cool and thin, and said she'd been looking forward to meeting me. I believed it, though not for reasons I fully understood at the time. Throughout dinner, I watched her closely, the way nurses do when something's off but not yet diagnosable. She reminded me of certain patients' families I'd met in the hospital, polite on the surface, but holding on so tightly to their loved ones you could see the strain in their knuckles. Every time Ryan spoke, Lorraine rested her gaze on him as if waiting to edit his sentences. When Jenna joked about wanting to live no more than 10 minutes from her school because she wasn't a fan of long commutes, Lorraine leaned forward. "Well, then you two could always move into my complex," she said. "There's a lovely unit a few doors down from me that opens every spring. Ryan grew up in that neighborhood. It would be perfect." Ryan chuckled lightly, not quite meeting Jenna's eyes. "Mom, we talked about this. We want a place of our own." Lorraine didn't drop the smile, but something in it faltered. "Of course," she said. "I was only thinking of practicality." I sipped my water, feeling a ripple of unease. Jenna reached for her fork and gave me a soft look that said she'd felt it too. As the conversation drifted to wedding plans, Lorraine's hand found Ryan's arm again and again, patting it in small, possessive gestures. When Jenna mentioned hoping for something intimate and simple, Lorraine chimed in with suggestions for venues, caterers, colors, most of which did not resemble anything Jenna ever wanted. Ryan tried to balance the two women with nervous laughter, and I could see my daughter shrinking just a little each time Lorraine overrode her without seeming to notice. The server cleared our plates, and when dessert arrived, I excused myself to the restroom. On my way back, I passed their table just as Lorraine said, in a soft, almost wistful voice, "I just don't know what I'd do if Ryan ever lived more than 20 minutes away. He's all I have." Her tone carried that tender tremor people use when they're planting guilt. I'd heard it before, in visiting rooms, whispered at bedsides, offered like a leash disguised as affection. When she saw me return, she straightened up and lifted her cup. "More coffee, Elaine?" I nodded, sitting back down, feeling Jenna's hand brush mine briefly under the table. It was her way of saying, "I see it too." After dinner, the four of us stepped outside into the cool night air. Streetlights glowed along the sidewalk, and the river moved in slow, quiet waves. Jenna and Ryan walked ahead, fingers intertwined. Lorraine lingered beside me. "He's a good man," she said softly. "Ryan, always been a caretaker. Even as a little boy, he worried about me more than I deserved." I glanced at her, unsure how to respond. Lorraine smiled again, but this time there was something tired in it, something lonely. "Sometimes I think," she murmured, "that when he marries, I'll feel it like losing a limb." The words drifted into the night and settled uneasily in my chest. It wasn't what she said, it was the way she clutched her purse, as if bracing herself for a future she refused to let arrive. When Ryan returned from the parking meter, she quickly brightened, looping her arm through his. "Ready, sweetheart?" He nodded, but the flicker of discomfort on his face was unmistakable, a small truth he hadn't yet admitted to himself. Driving home that night, I replayed Lorraine's words over and over. I didn't dislike her. I didn't pity her either. What I felt was more complicated, a quiet, instinctive warning that the house I'd bought for Jenna, the sanctuary I envisioned, might become the battleground for someone else's fear of being left behind. And as the street lamps blurred past my windshield, I knew the next steps in their relationship would test not just Jenna's boundaries, but the choices I had made on her behalf. The house was waiting, but so was the storm. When the house finally closed and the keys were in my hand, I drove straight there after work, the metal still warm from the attorney's office. The sky was washed in soft gold, the kind of evening that makes even ordinary streets look forgiving. I walked through each empty room slowly, listening to the echo of my footsteps. For the first time in a long while, I felt I'd done something right, something lasting. A few days later, I invited Jenna to see the house in person. She arrived with a bouquet of wildflowers and eyes so bright they reminded me of the little girl who used to run down grocery aisles pretending they were mountain trails. When I opened the door and she stepped inside, she froze as if she'd walked into a miracle. "Mom," she whispered, "it's beautiful." She moved from room to room with soft disbelief, touching windowsills, opening closet doors, tracing the grain of the kitchen counters. When she reached the back deck, she pushed the sliding door open and stepped out, letting the breeze lift her hair. I watched her stand there, silent, soaking in the feeling of belonging. I waited until she turned to me before telling her the truth, that the house would be hers before the wedding, that I had already begun the paperwork, that she would have a place of her own no matter what storms life brought. Her breath hitched, the flowers trembling in her hand. "Why would you do something this big?" "Because you deserve safety," I said, "and because life is unpredictable. I want you to have something no one can take from you." She hugged me then, her shoulders shaking with quiet tears. For a moment, everything felt settled. It was a warm, complete kind of peace, the peace mothers pray for but rarely get to hold. 2 days later, Ryan asked to see the house as well. He showed up with a 6-pack of iced tea and a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Jenna walked him through every room, her voice soft with pride. I hung back, watching the way he examined the place, his gaze lingering a little too long on the spare bedrooms. "This is generous," he said finally, nodding toward me. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," I replied, "but I wanted Jenna to start her marriage with a foundation, a real one." He smiled, but something flickered across his face, something like confusion tinged with disappointment. He didn't look ungrateful, exactly, just unsettled in a way I didn't yet understand. When we reached the kitchen, he leaned against the counter, glancing toward the hallway. 3 bedrooms, he said. "That's a lot of space." "It gives room for growth," I answered. "A home office, a guest room, maybe children one day." Jenna squeezed his arm playfully, but Ryan didn't return the gesture. He was still studying the layout, almost calculating it. Eventually, he stepped out onto the deck, pulling out his phone. "Just sending a picture to my mom," he said casually. Jenna didn't think twice about it, but something in my chest tightened. Lorraine had been polite enough at dinner, but the way she'd spoken about Ryan that night, like he was the last limb she could afford to lose, lingered in my memory like a bruise that refused to fade. My unease sharpened when Ryan returned inside, wearing that same polite smile, and said Lorraine wanted to drop by sometime this week to see the place. I told him that was fine, as long as Jenna was there, but Lorraine didn't wait for an invitation. 3 days later, I drove over with a box of fresh towels and found a silver sedan already parked in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. Inside, Lorraine stood in the living room with her coat draped over a dining chair, turning slowly as if appraising a property she planned to buy. "Oh, Elaine," she said, pretending surprise. "Ryan gave me a key. I hope you don't mind. I thought I'd help get things started. This house has so much potential." There were 2 cardboard boxes beside her, neatly taped and labeled in thin cursive, Elle's books and winter clothes. She wasn't here for a tour. She was here to move in. I felt my breath cool in my chest. "Lorraine, this house isn't set up yet, and only Jenna and I should have keys right now." Her smile faltered. "I just wanted to help." It's not like I was planning to stay tonight. The boxes said otherwise. I kept my voice steady. I need that key back. And these boxes can't stay. Her eyes shimmered with offended disbelief. I thought we were family. We are, I said gently. But Jenna needs to walk into her marriage with her own space. Let's respect that. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if the rejection wounded her deeply. But after a long moment, she handed over the key. Still, when I left the house that afternoon, carrying her boxes to her car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't retreat. It was reconnaissance. And she would be back. When Jenna and Ryan left for their honeymoon, I spent those 2 quiet weeks settling the house so it would feel like a beginning, not a construction site. Frank helped me assemble bookshelves, haul rugs, and fix the stubborn sliding door that stuck every time it rained. We moved through the rooms slowly, taking care with details the way you do when you're building something meant to last. I folded new towels into neat stacks, arranged dishes Jenna once admired, and stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, imagining her waking up to morning light spilling across the covers. It felt good, purposeful. It felt like love taking physical shape. The morning before the housewarming, Lorraine appeared without knocking, the same silver sedan glinting in the driveway. She carried a tote bag filled with embroidered towels, a stack of framed baby photos of Ryan, and a decorative throw she was already shaking out over the back of the couch. I caught it midair. "This needs to wait," I said gently. "Jenna hasn't even seen the house finished." "I'm helping," she insisted, stepping toward the kitchen as if she owned the air inside it. "You've done your part. I'm doing mine." I placed myself between her and the stove. This isn't about parts. This is Jenna's home. She gets to arrive first. Her expression tightened. For a moment, I saw the loneliness underneath her determination, but it passed quickly, replaced by that defensive smile she used like armor. She gathered her things with deliberate grace and walked out, the door clicking shut with a finality that told me she wasn't done. I was right. At the barbecue the next afternoon, the yard filled with the hum of conversation, sunlight glinting off mason jars and folding chairs. I was setting down the last tray of lemonade when Ryan tapped his glass. His voice carried easily, cheerful and confident. "So," he said, glancing at me, "when are you bringing your stuff over? Mom?" The words hit harder the second time, spoken in front of a dozen witnesses. Laughter faltered. Lorraine lifted her chin as if accepting applause. Jenna's face drained of color. Ryan continued. "It just makes sense for her to move in. We've got the space." My hand steadied on the pitcher. I stepped forward because Jenna couldn't find her voice yet. "This house isn't prepared for another resident," I said calmly, "and the deed is already in Jenna's name." Lorraine let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Meaning you won't allow it to change. Interesting how control can hide behind generosity." "It's not control," I answered. "It's protection, something every mother understands." Ryan's jaw tensed. "So you think I'm here for a free house?" "I think you're standing in a moment you didn't think through," I replied. Jenna finally spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "Ryan, you made a decision without me, and then you announced it like it was a gift." That was when Lorraine pressed a hand dramatically to her chest, swaying just enough to pull every sympathetic gaze toward her. Ryan panicked, reaching for her, but she waved him off with a breathy, "I just can't handle being unwelcome in my own family." I'd seen that performance before, different faces, same script. I stepped closer. "No one here is your enemy, Lorraine. But you don't get to rewrite whose home this is." Her eyes hardened. She clung to Ryan as if losing him meant losing oxygen. They left soon after, tension trailing behind them like smoke from a snuffed candle. In the weeks that followed, The silence between Jenna and Ryan forced him to confront truths he'd long avoided. Therapy softened the rigid places in him. Distance loosened the grip his mother held. When he finally returned, he didn't come with demands, only sincerity. Jenna chose to meet him there, not because she was afraid to be alone, but because she understood herself now. The house stands steady, and so does she. And I've learned that the hardest, most necessary word a woman can speak is also the one that builds the strongest walls around her peace. No.